Hey guys, this is Shelby with the Rogers Public Library. So this week for Full Steam Ahead, I wanted to talk to you guys about trains. And so first, just a note on terminology. So when we say trains, what we're talking about is the whole assembly, right? All the different cars connected together, right? And normally there's two parts to a train, right? There's a locomotive, right? This is the engine that powers the train, that makes it go. And then there's railway cars, right? And railway cars are just, little vehicles that are attached to a locomotive. Sometimes they carry freight, sometimes they carry things like milk or gasoline, or they can even carry people, right? And there's also some cars that are just called rail cars. In some places, rail cars can refer to railway cars, but they can also refer to basically like a car that has an engine built into it that doesn't need a locomotive, right? So railroads are mainly, or modern railroads are mainly an invention of the 19th century, right? But they're based on two different technologies that are a lot older. One is railways, right? So railways actually date back to the 16th century, right? They developed in mine to move mine carts so that people can gather ores more effectively, right? But the thing about these early rails is that they were made out of wood, right? So wood isn't super strong, and so it can't carry really heavy loads. So I guess you could say pre-industrial rails before really the 1820s weren't capable of moving really big steam engines, and so you couldn't have railroads like we have today. The other part is, the steam engine, right? So steam engines also developed kind of in connection with mining, right? The very first useful steam engine, which was produced like at the end of the 17th century, like in the 1690s or the first decade of the 18th century, was used to pump water, right? And then you get this guy named Richard Trevithick who makes a more useful steam engine that's a lot smaller and a lot more efficient. And he attaches that to a rail car, and he does the first railway trip in 1804. And the rail gets a little bit far, but then it breaks the rails, right? Because they're not strong enough. And the very first railway that I guess we would recognize, or the very first, railroad system we would recognize as like kind of what we have today, was in the 1820s. It's called the Stockton and Darlington Railroad in northern England, and it mainly, just moved ore from mines to the coast so that it could be shipped other places and to be processed into metals, right? And then it was copied and it spread all over the place. And because this railroad was so effective, actually, like the majority of railroads in the world had the same type of rails, right? So this Stockton and Darlington, there's they have a span, right? And the span is 1435 millimeters apart, right? And that's called standard gauge, and it's the gauge that's used in the United States. It's used in most parts of Europe, and all over the world, right? So like I said before, early trains are steam engines, right? Kind of like this, right? So the steam engines on steam trains are more effective than like really early engines, but they're still really big and they're really dirty, right? Because you have to burn things like wood or coal, or and it produces a lot of smoke and a lot of like kind of nasty chemicals that you don't want to breathe in, right? And so since and into the 20th century, we started using different types of train systems, right? So the two most common today are diesel electric and electric, right? Electric is what it sounds like, right? You just have an electric generator that turns the wheels of the train and makes it go. And unlike electric cars, you don't have a battery in them, right? They're powered by third rails or overhead lines, right? So a third rail is just a rail that goes along the two rails that the train rolls on. It provides power over the line, kind of like an electricity line or a telephone wire. It's the same basic thing. And then diesel electric, kind of similar, right? It has electric components, including generators. But instead of the generators being powered by a third rail, they're powered by diesel engines, right? So the diesel engines spin a generator, right? They move magnets along, and that generates electricity, and that makes the rail go. In the United States, for the most part, we have more diesel electric trains than we do electric trains, just because electric trains or electric railroads are very expensive to build, right? Because you have to electrify the whole length. And we already have a bunch of railroads that aren't electrified that work perfectly fine for diesel electric engines. But they are really common in other parts of the world, like Europe and China and Japan. And actually, China has the most electric railroads. Like, I think it's over 10,000 miles. And they also have the most high-speed trains, which are trains that go over like 200 miles an hour. In contrast, the fastest trains in the United States go about 90 miles an hour. So that's a little bit faster than cars go on the highway. Yeah, so that's a little bit about trains. We have some books, besides this book here that I showed you guys a picture from, which is just called Trains by Seymour Simon. We have a couple books about bullet trains, right? Or high-speed rail. So I think these are both, they actually might be the same train, but these are both high-speed trains in Japan, right? And then this one, which is more specifically about steam engines and early trains in the United States, for the most part. But our craft for this week is, of course, a locomotive, right? So if you guys know what tangrams are, it's basically a block of like triangles and stuff that make a square. And I guess you can say it's a puzzle, right? You can use it to make different designs. So for this one, I made a train and then I traced along the outside of it. And so you can get this kind of like, I guess, puzzle mat and take home and make your own little train. Let's see. Got that big triangle. And we have this tinier triangle. I don't think that's the right one. I think we're supposed to use this one. Yeah, that looks right. We got this guy. Goes right there. This guy goes right here. This guy goes right here. This guy goes right here. And this diamond goes over here, right? So that's our train. So this square is a smokestack, right? So it's a steam engine. That's where the smoke comes out from the fire. And then it has a little shovelly thing on the front that just makes sure that the train is clear. And then I guess that part's a little bit confusing because those are supposed to be the wheels or the bogies, right? The thing that the wheels are connected to on a train are called, or on a rail car, I guess, are called bogies for whatever reason. But instead of being circles, they're upside down triangles. But it works, right? You can definitely tell what it is. So yeah, you can come pick up this craft at the library anytime this week. So I hope you guys had fun and you learned something, and I'll see you next Wednesday.